Okay, so I think we're all getting pretty fed up with this, right? We got people getting in front of vehicles. We got like fist fights between Marxist, cultural Marxist idiots, and they're generally not very good at fighting. They're good at making a lot of noise, you know. And so this was going on today. And here we got another little matchup, little little bitch fight. Nothing really, you know. But another thing we had today was we had police pulling, finally kind of putting an end to this, starting to, you know, get back at it. Now, why is this happening? Why is this happening? It's happening in Democrat states. It's happening in Democrat-run cities. See, the federal government doesn't have a right to send in the army and to send in the police force to clear up this mess. This is the responsibility of the cities and the responsibilities of the state. So they have separations of power in the U.S. And so what ends up happening is they need a very serious insurrection in order to do the Insurrection Act. Now they're getting pretty damn close to it here. I mean, and it seems to be that that's what they're doing. So here we have forces, cultural Marxist forces, and I'm going to refer to this video that explains it all at the end of this one, and you'll see how it all ties in together. So who are these kids? What's going on? They're all like, why are they so messed up? Why do they look so terrible? Why do they make such terrible life decisions? Why are they mixed gender and all that stuff? Why are half of them teachers? Well, I'll tell you, you know what I think is the reason why? I think it's the Duluth Model. So what the hell is the Duluth Model? Shocking, really. The Duluth Model, or Domestic Abuse Intervention Prevention, is a program developed to reduce domestic violence against women. It's named after Duluth, Minnesota, where the city was developed. The program is largely founded by the feminist Ellen Pence, and as of 2006, the Duluth Model is the most common batterer intervention program used in the United States. Critics argue the method can also be ineffective as it's developed without minority communities in mind and can only address root psychological or emotional causes of abuse in addition to completely neglecting male victims and female perpetrators of abuse. What is the reason behind this? Very simple. This is to break down the family. Everything about the Duluth Model breaks it down, breaks the family apart. It is automatically assumes that the males are responsible, and it immediately lets the woman off. So you have a power dynamic problem. So, you know, here you are in a family and you're a man, and you have whatever conflicts or situations happen, and at any time the woman can pick up the phone and have you arrested. And she doesn't even need to prove it. She can lie straight up, you're gone. That's what the Duluth Model is. You know, he says it's effective. It's effective at breaking up families. So anyway, we can deal with that, but it's basically the criticism of the Duluth Model was centered on the program's insistence that men are perpetrators who are violent because they have been socialized in a patriarchy that condones male violence, and that women are victims who are violent only in self-defense. Right. Maybe 5%. I mean, it exists, but for the majority of guys like me, this is not our world. We get slapped with this shit, but this is not our existence. There's no beating up. I'm in no desire to you know, being a conflictive. I don't even have relationships with women in Canada because of shit like this. To be honest with you, I'd rather be alone than deal with this crap. Anyway, some critics argue that the program is ignore research linking domestic violence to substance abuse. Yeah, psychological problems such as attachment disorders, trace to childhood abuse and neglect, in the absence of a history of adequate socializing and training. That's the lack of a father figure. Others criticize the Duluth Model as being overtly confrontational rather than therapeutic, absolutely, focusing solely on challenging the abuses and dealing with underlying emotional psychological issues. So the Duluth Model was developed by people who didn't understand anything about therapy. Absolutely. It was done by a feminist, by a cultural Marxist feminist, no doubt. It also points out that the lesbian battering is more frequent than heterosexual battering. And Philip Cook points out that the case of homosexual domestic violence, the patriarchy is absent and there is no male dominance of women in the same-sex relationships. In fact, female-on-female abuse is reported more than twice as frequent as male-on-male abuse. Furthermore, some critics point out that the model ignores the reality that women can be the perpetrators of domestic violence in heterosexual relationships as well. All very controversial, all things you're not allowed to talk about, all this stuff. Why? Because this shit's been going on since 2006. It's been the majority. It's been going on for 30 years. So now you have people that are in their 20s and getting into 30 years old that are affected by this. Because I don't think anything did more damage to the family than the Duluth model. I can't think of anything. The police come to your door, they put you in jail, and you're done. Your whole life is done. Your kids are miserable. And what happens when they grow up in broken families? We're all hearing godless, broken families. See, people who are into the religion and who take the Mennonites, take any strong religion, call it what you want, call it patriarchal, call it God-fearing, whatever. They don't have these problems. Even around the world. What am I talking about? Cluster B personality disorders. All these people that are in here, these freaks, you know what they have? Personality disorders. And that's what they're being exploited. They're actually manufacturing a generation of people that have grown up with personality disorders. Because this is what this does. So how do you say it? Okay, well, let's look it up. What do I mean? Cluster B personality, those are basically never grew up, shithead kid disorders. You grow up to be an asshole, whatever. You can be antisocial. Okay, so personality disorders are types of mental health conditions that can lead to consistent, long-term, unhealthy patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. There are three main types: cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. People with antisocial personality disorders often demonstrate... Antisocial personality disorder. People with antisocial personality disorders demonstrate a pattern of disregard for any violation of rights of others. Deceitfulness and manipulation are used for personal gain. They may treat other people harshly or lie and cheat to reap these personal benefits. They may also be more likely to engage in theft. However, they generally have no remorse for what they have done. People with antisocial personality disorders also have an increased risk of drug and alcohol addiction. So your typical junkie on the, selling weed and not weed, but selling hard drugs, antisocial. Where have we seen these people before? All over the place. Those are your guys that are going to go around doing the shooting. These are your Antifa types, right? Borderline personality disorder. People with borderline personality disorders often have unstable personal relationships. It can also affect the way they view yourself. Symptoms include impulse behavior, chronic feelings of emptiness, chronic feelings of abandonment, intense episodes of anger, reckless behavior. Borderline personality disorders just love to be part of a group and part of being with a group like Antifa, I suppose, where you all get together, you all have your communal thing, and you have your feelings of abandonment issues corrected, your chronic feelings of emptiness are filled, your intense episodes of anger have an outlet, reckless behavior, standing in the middle of the road, messing around. Anyway, and then we have histrionic personality disorders. People with histrionic personality disorders often strive to be the center of attention. They may have various attention-seeking behaviors and often in social inappropriate situations. These behaviors may include provocative interactions, theatrical expressions, a false sense of intimacy. People with disorders are at increased risk of suicidal gestures. Your gender benders, your weird, queer, LGBT, whatever, not sex. This has nothing to do with sex. This has everything to do with personalities, okay? But people who turn around and make themselves, wear dresses and look stupid and can consider themselves whatever, there you go. Center of attention. And here's the worst of the bunch, the narcissistic personality disorder. So people with this personality believe they are superior to others. Symptoms include extreme negative reaction to criticism, elevated sense of self-importance, preoccupation with grandiose thoughts of success, excessive needs for admiration, strong sense of entitlement, People with this disorder often show lack of empathy and may exploit personal relationships to elevate their self-image. Okay, so this is where you can get into the dangerous personalities, especially when you start getting into Machiavellian and antisocial. Because then when you end up, these are the people that are pulling the strings. Your George Soros, your Hillary Rodham Clinton, your Al Gores, all Barack Obama. Extreme negative reaction to criticism. Elevated sense of self-importance. Okay? So people say that, they'll go off about how Donald Trump is. Well, Donald Trump takes a lot of negative criticism and he doesn't overreact to it. As a matter of fact, he probably should be a little bit more hard on. But he hits back, but he doesn't oppress criticism like Barack Obama would or does. Elevated sense of self-importance. Again, these are people that think the utopia is coming. The great cause, and they push it and they take what do they do? They take advantage of other people, right? So people, that they exploit personal relationships. So what are the causes and risk factors? Personality disorders are likely caused by a combination of genetics and environmental factors. One study found a strong correlation between borderline personality and a history of sexual trauma. Another study found the link between children who are verbally abused by their mothers and various personality disorders include borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. So there you go. And can you fix these? No. Basically, there is no treatment. You grow up. Maybe 10 years in the pen, maybe getting your shit together, but there's a tipping point, and half the people we're seeing that are freaking out, they're past the tipping point. They'll never change. They're just going to be like that, and they're going to be miserable their entire lives, and they're probably going to live not a very long life because they're completely useless, unemployable, unable to be in a relationship, and they're just basically a generation of garbage people. So what do you do with these? What do you do? Basically, they have to avoid them all. Avoid them. What can you do? So let's just end it with, I'm going to just play this because this is really sums it all up. And we'll just let it go out with this.
Let us begin with a very terse description. Cultural Marxism is a broad term which refers to the advocacy and application of critical theory, and more generally to the cultural, political, and academic influence of certain elements within the contemporary left. The roots of cultural Marxism are to be found in what is commonly known as the Frankfurt School. The term arose informally to describe the thinkers affiliated or merely associated with the Frankfurt Institute for Social Research at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, Germany during the interwar period. Critical of both capitalism and Soviet socialism, they sought to address the perceived shortcomings of classical Marxism in the pursuit of societal change. Their work came to be referred to as critical theory. Defining or categorizing critical theory is exceptionally difficult, for it pertains to a broad, almost disparate set of ideas, individuals, and approaches. The underlying and enduring aspect of critical theory, common to all its offshoots, nonetheless, is the creation of interdisciplinary theories that might serve as instruments of social transformation. During the 1960s, the Frankfurt School critical theory gained traction with some segments of the left-wing and leftist thought in both Europe and North America. Today, its influence is felt throughout Western academia, dominating the social sciences and humanities. Gender studies and whiteness studies being two such examples. One of the most influential critical theorists and an original member of the Frankfurt School was Herbert Marcuse. A cursory glance at any paragraph written by Marcuse will set alarm bells ringing for anyone even remotely familiar with the current culture of intolerance on college and university campuses. Consider the following passage from his 1965 essay, Repressive Tolerance. The small and powerless minorities which struggle against the false consciousness and its beneficiaries must be helped. Their continued existence is more important than the preservation of abused rights and liberties, which grant constitutional powers to those who oppress these minorities. Social justice, feminism, neo-progressivism, and post-colonialism, to name but a few, are all movements inspired by or born out of critical theory, and thus all come under the umbrella of cultural Marxism. Be it gender, sexual orientation, family, race, culture, or religion, every aspect of a person's identity is to be questioned, every norm or standard in society challenged, and ideally altered in order to benefit supposedly oppressed groups. Classical Marxism saw class conflict as occurring between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, between the haves and the have-nots. Cultural Marxism views such a conflict as existing between the oppressed and the oppressors, between those with privilege and those without it. The working class has been replaced by minorities. Majority groups are typically defined as privileged and oppressive, with minority groups accordingly labelled underprivileged and oppressed. Heterosexuals are oppressive. Cisgender people are oppressive. Whites are oppressive, especially white men. Christians are oppressive. Those that do not fit into these groups are thus considered oppressed. It stands to reason, therefore, that if heterosexuals are oppressors, the solution is to encourage other forms of sexuality. If whites are oppressors, the solution is racial diversity. If cisgender people are oppressors, the solution is to encourage transgenderism. If Christians are oppressors, the solution is to propagate Islam. Theodor Adorno, another original member of the Frankfurt School, wrote a book entitled The Authoritarian Personality, in which he defines parenthood, pride in one's family, Christianity, adherence to traditional gender roles and attitudes towards sex, and the love of one's own country as pathological phenomena. This tendency to pathologize opinions and life patterns, which are not in accordance with its own political ends, is characteristic of cultural Marxism. Differing views are thus described as irrational fears or phobias. For example, a person who feels uncomfortable living as a minority in an area dominated by Muslim migrants may be decried as an Islamophobe, since wishing to live amongst those culturally and ethnically similar to oneself is considered sick and phobic. When Pakistani Muslims living in Britain, by contrast, show in-group preference, converting entire sections of a town or city into a mini Pakistan, there is no sickness, no phobia, only multiculturalism.
20 years ago, there were no Pakis here, no one was doing nothing. But now, the Pakis are made a stamp, man, trust, you know what I mean? Now, think 20 years ahead, boy, fuck knows, man, this is gonna be Pakistan. Or England, it's gonna be Pakistan, man. They're all fucking shipping over.
A popular and propagandist manifestation of cultural Marxism is political correctness, in which media channels and social scientists make it a mandatory exercise to do the following. Question common language. Illegal immigrants, for example, are to be referred to as undocumented migrants, while ethnic discrimination is referred to as affirmative action. Their ambition to define and redefine words can be seen as a means of controlling the discourse and altering cultural norms. Racism and sexism have been redefined as a product of prejudice plus power, which leads to such ridiculous statements as, "There's no such thing as sexism against men," and
I, an ethnic minority woman, cannot be racist or sexist towards white men.
maintain an unwaveringly favourable view of groups which are marked as being oppressed. Islam is a religion of peace.
You see how they did that? I, as an ethnic minority woman, cannot be racist or sexist towards white men. That is the dividing, cut. This brings up the Cartman theory, and I think I got one more thing that puts this together. This is the triangulation and paradigm shifting. That's explained in the Cartman theory. But you see, when you cut through and you turn around and you make an entire generation believe that you cannot be racist towards white men, will make you racist towards white men. They're actually being the things that they're trying to avoid, and that is this twist. That is the twist. So what I mean by paradigm shift? We had when we had COVID, everything changed. All of a sudden, things that meant freedom was gone. You couldn't, whatever. Everything changed. That's a shift. And I think what they need to do is they need to make one more change. That's turn everything on top of its head by taking everything that means anything, taking down white men because they are the head of the family and they're also the army that fights back, which is essentially, so what they have here is cannon fodder. Cannon fodder. For who? Well, for the Marxists, the Chinese, the Russians. Well, I don't think it's the Russians because the Russians don't seem to have much in the game. They don't have much power. They don't have nowhere near as much power as the Chinese. The George Soros funded Antifa stuff that's actually doing this right now to our generation. They're fodder. See, this stuff was done over 30 years ago. They didn't plan this stuff 30 years in the past. They're just basically taking advantage of a generation of fools. And that's what this does. It created everybody who believes this shit is a fool. Because that was the intention.
An ethnic minority woman cannot be racist or sexist towards white men.
Maintain an unwaveringly favourable view of groups which are marked as being oppressed. Islam is a religion of peace. Black Lives Matter is a peaceful, legitimate protest movement. Feminism is only about equality, and so forth.
You see how
no deviation from the aforementioned narrative will be entertained, ever, nor will criticism.
I grew up like
While
that.
communism, as Marx envisioned it, offered the resolution of class conflict in a utopian social system, all that cultural Marxism offers is a desolate form of eternal warfare between ever more narrowly defined groups of offended minorities. The only meaningful consequence that its wide application could possibly ever have is the marginalization of traditional European culture.
Yeah. See. So here you go. The division of the cultures through using the Duluth Model, which creates a bunch of cluster Bs who are then exploited by cultural Marxists. And in this case, it's in Canada, it's mostly Chinese. I think it's probably mostly Chinese in the US too. And open source George Soros is bullshit. Whoever's paying Antifa and BLM. I'm not exactly sure which of the two are paying for it, but I think they're both benefiting. But it could very well be a combination of both, whereas Chinese system and Chinese way of organizing things like putting everybody in internment camps and collecting data, they're going to take care of all that, while the Democrat George Soros people are going to rule and basically have this as their little devil's playground, because that's kind of what they want. That's kind of what they're doing. But that's a whole other subject. So here we go. So what are we? We're in the middle of a cultural revolutionary fight. Will we win? Well, as long as people get up and start punching fucking guys out like that, yeah. But does it have to be a case where, like, look at Ted Wheeler here. See, this is he's goading him in, right? But does it have to be a case where Donald Trump sends in the National Guard and seizes power and control? Because that's kind of a trap, right? So how are they dealing with this? These are very smart people that are coming out of this. So we have, well, the way that the kind of way of dealing with this, the way Donald Trump is dealing with this, is basically to become involved and basically become a vocal majority. Don't be quiet. Get off your ass and do shit. Because really, it's up to the people to get off their ass and just deal with these children. They're basically children. And put them away. And don't vote Democrat. We got votes coming up. They're going to steal it. Yeah, but it's going to be a bloody landslide. And you know what? And that was, I think, the entire plan all along. This whole 4 years was all about drawing them out. And then Donald Trump is just going to just turn around and expose all these people. And then they're all going to end up in jail. And over time, through convictions. But the problem with the justice system right now is I think most of these prosecutions are going to have to happen if they get a full majority in both houses and Donald Trump is able to really be the president of the full United States and not just part of it, because clearly he doesn't have any control over the justice system. Otherwise, they'd be arresting people, and they can't because he can't get these people arrested. You can say so in the White House, I want those people arrested. Well, sir, you don't have the power to do that. Well, they're just going to and that's where he's at. So, know your enemy. And your enemy is a cultural Marxist.